Okay, everybody, good morning and happy 4th of July. I'm on vacation, which is why my background looks a little bit different, but I haven't been able to get to any of these in a couple of days, maybe about a week. So I wanted to go ahead and jump on and get chapter 7 done for you. Eventually, we'll have them all done. Just bear with me, it takes time. So I'll go over my little spiel like I always do. This is Miss Wendy, Real Talk with Miss Wendy. You always get the no frills version because I'm not working at the moment. Looking for a new position in the Tampa Bay area that kind of fits with my fundamentals a little bit better. So, with that being said, I will go over the questions. I always tell you if you do not know the answer to a question, you absolutely, as a guest, always choose B. It's the most common answered question, and if you choose the same one every single time, you're more likely to get a couple of them right. Of course, that's like I said, that's just if you're completely guessing. Oftentimes, you can eliminate a couple of them, and that helps you narrow down what it is that you need to choose from. You're going to see things that are, we'll say always or except. Those are kind of clues as to where we're going with our question. And if you watch my videos, you'll know that I do not know every question, the answer to every question in on these tests. I do the best I can. I do have an answer key, whoop, but I do try to go through them and then just verify my answers. So don't come for me if it's wrong. Again, I am just a human. So let's go ahead and get started with chapter 7, test review. Again, you're not guaranteed to get all these questions on your test, but you should get a few of them. Usually a test bank is going to have like 100 questions to choose from, where the review tests only have about 25. So this should hopefully get you moving in the right direction. I recommend that you go over this before your test. Listen to it on the way to school. Listen to it when you're studying. Those kind of things will help. You ain't got to look at me. I just do it because it makes me feel more comfortable, I guess. But you don't just listen to it, and go over it and go over it and go over it and see if you can start to understand. And if I have any additional information, I'll go ahead and give that to you too while I'm going through this. If you hear noise in the background, please forgive me. It is my husband. He's watching TV. Again, we're in a camper. It's 25 foot. Can't really get away from it. So here we go. Chapter 7, Hair and Scalp Properties. Which of the following is a reason a cosmetologist should understand hair and scalp properties? Well, that's pretty big question. Long answers. I don't like to read through the long answers. If I can avoid it, I'm going to try and read the first couple of words, see if I can figure out if I can eliminate that answer or not. So, why should we understand hair and scalp properties? A. Identifying the shape of hair follicles can help. That's true. When recommending methods to make a client's hair grow faster. I guess I got to read them all. So, is that a reason a cosmetologist should understand hair and scalp properties? Yeah, I'd say so. Identify the cause of dry or oily hair, oily scalp helps to better determine medication. We don't really do medication, but I understand what they're saying. Identify the hair growth cycles and the differences between common and uncommon hair loss will help recommend hair loss treatments to the client. We don't have to identify the hair growth cycles of the client. I need to know them, but I don't need to identify them in the client. Identify the elasticity of hair helps to determine treatments to soften coarse gray hairs to match the texture of the client's pigmented hair. Okay, so I'm going to kind of back up here, and out of all of these, actually C probably looks like the best answer because we're talking about hair and scalp properties. If you're talking about hair growth cycles, you are going to want to know what the difference is between those stages, and that actually comes through in this test. I'm almost positive you're going to see the different phases, but it will help you understand the difference between different hair loss treatments and hair loss. So I do believe the answer to question 1 is C. Looking at my answer key, that is correct. It is C, identify hair growth cycles and the differences between common and uncommon hair loss treatments to the client. Okay. Number 2, all of the following are live-in portions of the hair that are below the skin surface except one of these. So there's that except word. So all of these look the same except for one. So all of these are below the skin surface except for one. So is the hair bulb? Yep. Erector pili muscle. Okay. It is below the skin surface, but it's not a living portion of the hair. So I'm going to kick that one immediately. The hair follicle, yes, part of the hair and below the skin surface. The dermal papilla, definitely part of the hair and below the skin surface. So my answer is going to be B for question 2. Looking, yes, that's correct. It is erector pili muscle. What is an erector pili muscle? Nothing more than a goosebump. So that has nothing to do with the hair. That is a goosebump. It's called an erector pili muscle. Number 3, each of the following is a layer of the hair shaft structure except. So which one of these is not part of the hair shaft? Well, there's 3 parts of the hair shaft. You've got the cortex, the cuticle, and the medulla. So that sticks out right away. For number 3 is going to be B, looking down. That is correct. B, the hair fiber. Not saying that's not a thing, it's just not part of the hair structure. So hair fiber B is the answer. It is not part of the hair shaft structure. Question 4, which portion of the hair root structure supplies nutrients so that the hair can grow? All right, you got the bulb, the dermal papilla, the erector pili, and the hair follicle. Well, we can kick out the erector pili again. It's not part of the hair. Out of the 3 that are left, I believe it is dermal papilla. Number 4, looking down, that is correct. So your dermal papilla is where you get all your nutrients from. All right, number 5, which sentence best describes the medulla? The medulla is the outermost layer. That is not correct. Medulla is the cone-shaped elevation at the base of the hair bulb. Again, no. The medulla is the hair pith or core. That is correct. And the medulla is a fibrous protein layer of hair. We are going to go with C for number 5. That is correct. The medulla is the hair's pith or core. It is the absolute middle section of the hair. Now, I'm going to say my little thing here because I say it every time the medulla comes up. The book will tell you the medulla serves no purpose. That's what the book says. If you're asked that question on a test, you're going to say no, it serves no purpose. If you are asked that question behind the chair because something's not reacting correctly, that is where that comes into play. I don't care what science tells me at this moment. The medulla has a purpose. They have not discovered what that purpose is yet, but I can tell you from experience behind the chair of 30 years, if a client has no medulla, your perms will process very quickly, your bleach will decolorize extremely fast, and colors will take funky. You will not pick up as much neutral, you're going to pick up the base a lot more, and they're going to want to go muddy very fast if the client has no medulla. My little speech is, I don't know of anything on the human body that doesn't have a purpose. They just don't know what that purpose is yet, but I can tell you that the lack of a medulla will affect the hair. That's my speech. So, the thing that describes the medulla the best, number 5, is C, the medulla's hair pith and core. 6, which layer of the hair shaft provides strength, elasticity, and color? That's a lot of things, so I already know what the answer is, but let's go through them. A, the hair cuticle. Well, that's the outermost layer of the hair. That's where all you have your little scales that open and close that are affected. And B, the hair fiber. That doesn't sound right. C, the medulla. Well, if you can live without a medulla, because not everybody has one, that definitely is not where you're going to get your strength, elasticity, and color. But the cortex, that's what we call the meat of the hair. That is where you're going to get your strength, your elasticity, and your color. It makes up the majority of your hair. So the cortex is your answer. Number 6 is D. What are the major, it's number 7, excuse me. What are the major chemical elements that make up human hair? This is one of those things that you just got to know. You probably learned it in science in the 8th grade, but we'll go over it. A, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur. If you take the first letter of every single one of those words, it spells out cones. Cohns. None of the others do that. Your answer is going to be A, 7, yes, is A, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and sulfur. None of the other answers make sense. While some of those things are in hair, it is not the elements, the chemical elements that make up human hair. Some people say chons, CHONS, which would be carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur, which is how I was taught. But most people now say cones, COHNS. So either way, totally fine. Those are the chemical elements. Number 8, which of the following best describes how a disulfide bond in the human hair is formed? Okay, let me just look real quick because okay. Oppositely charged atoms in the hair are attracted to one another to form weak physical cross-linked side bonds. I don't know if that's necessarily true at the moment. Let's go with B. Amino acids are chemically bonded to each other end to end to form a polypeptide chain. Okay, that's true, but how does that describe how a disulfide bond in the human hair is formed? Oppositely charged atoms are attracted to each other to form cross-link side bonds between adjacent polypeptide chains. Okay, sulfur atoms on neighboring cysteine amino acids within polypeptide chains in the hair join. That is your answer. So what you were looking for was those cysteine amino acids that sit within the polypeptide chain, and that's what joins the hair together. That's how it's formed. So number 8 is D. All right, number 9. I need to adjust myself here because I am quite uncomfortable sitting on this bed. Let's do it. Sorry, I gotta do this. All right. We're on 9. Which of the following is a situation in which a cosmetologist would allow their hair to cool before styling? That is a very good thing to do, right? We love to cool our hair before styling. And why do we do that? All right. So when salt side bonds are being formed by changes in pH during chemical servicing. No. When hydrogen side bonds have been broken by the heat from a curling iron. That is very true. When peptide bonds between amino acids are broken by a heat lamp during a color processing. Doesn't matter to have anything to do with styling. When disulfide bonds are converted to a lanthanide bonds during servicing with a flat iron. That is not true. So the answer is going to be B. Let me verify that B. When hydrogen side bonds have been broken by the heat from a curling iron. So that is the bond that actually gets broken when you heat the hair up. Okay, it breaks and then it reforms when the hair cools down. So when hydrogen side bonds have been broken by the heat from a curling iron, that is the situation that you want the hair to cool before styling. Number 10. What is the outermost layer of hair? Well, we talked about that a few questions before. This is where I'm saying sometimes a question previous will give you an answer to a following question later on, right? So the outermost layer of the hair is going to be the hair cuticle. Those are all the scales, like scales on a fish. And when you hit them with anything that is alkaline, it's going to open the scales of those fish, the scales of your hair. So number 10 is going to be C. That is correct. Hair cuticle is the outermost layer of the hair. Number 11. If a cosmetologist holds a strand of hair with one hand while sliding the hand's thumb and forefinger from the end of the strand to the client's scalp, what component of the hair is being analyzed? Porosity, elasticity, density, or texture? So it should be porosity. Number 11, is porosity. So again, the scales, those cuticle layers, like scales on a fish, if they're all open, if they're all jagged and flayed out, When you take the opposite direction of how that hair grows, right? So if I'm on my hair and I pull it down, you don't feel those cuticle layers. But if I'm on my hair and I go towards the scalp, now I'm going to feel all of the cuticle layers, whether they're open or closed. Um, and that's going to help me understand porosity, because the very first thing that porosity does, what is porosity? Water. So the very first thing that porosity does is open those cuticle layers. And you feel that. It feels rough. It feels sticky almost. All right, let's go on to number 12. Which component of hair is defined as the thickness or the diameter of an individual hair strand? Okay, each individual hair strand. They're not talking about how thick the overall head of hair is. They're talking about each individual hair strand. So it should be texture. Porosity has nothing to do with your thickness. That's how much water you have. Elasticity, that's how much the hair stretches and returns to its natural shape. Texture has to do with each individual hair strand, and density has to do with the overall amount of hair that you have. So the texture, right? So there's that little difference. Texture just means how thick the hair is and what kind of curl it produces. So thinner hair or thicker hair, curly hair, straight hair, it's going to have either flat hair, circular hair. The thickness of each hair strand also determines the cuticle layers. But number 12 is texture. The component of hair is defined as the thickness or the diameter of an individual hair strand is your hair texture. Which of the following can be a cause of dry hair and dry scalp? Overactive sebaceous glands. Well, I know that a sebaceous gland is your oil glands, so it's clearly not going to be that, because if I'm overactive, I'm producing more oil than I need. Inactive. That makes sense. If I have no oil, hair is going to be dry. Hair follicles growing out of the head at a perpendicular angle has nothing to do with your scalp, whether it's dry or hair dry. In the absence of melanin, I have gray hair. My hair is no more dry than someone who has colored hair or naturally red hair or whatever. But the only one that makes sense in this one for number 13 is going to be B, inactive sebaceous glands. 13, checking, verifying, it is B. All right, number 14. Which of the following best describes a procedure a cosmetologist could use to determine how quickly hair will process during chemical servicing? All right, we can feel a strand of hair to determine the hair's texture. That would be helpful. We can consider how much of the scalp is visible to determine how many hairs that are on each square inch of scalp, whether it's fine or dense. Let me just look at the answer here. All right. Examine the shape of a cross section of a strand of hair to determine the wave pattern. I think that's a little bit overkill, don't you? Determine the slope of the hair follicles to identify the hair growth pattern. I don't care about that when the hair comes to processing during chemicals. So the only one that even really makes sense is A, feel a strand of the hair to determine the hair's texture. That's the first thing we do, right? During our consultation, when they're sitting in our chair and we're talking to them, how you doing today? What hobbies do you like? What's going on with your hair? We're testing, we're looking, we're feeling, we're testing. Those are all the things that we're doing during our consultation. So we're going to feel the hair. A is your answer. Number 15. Which statement best describes what may have happened to cause a client's hair to grow in a whorl pattern? All right, the hair is the whorl who has a raised cuticle, whereas the surrounding hair does not. That's not true. The strands of hair in the whorl are oily due to overactive sebaceous glands. Not true. The strands of hair in the whorl are leaving the hair follicles at an angle different from the surrounding hairs. I like that. The strands of hair in the whorl are less elastic than the surrounding hair as a result of damage from a thermal styling tool. That is absolutely not true. The only one that makes sense is that they're leaving the hair follicles at an angle different from the surrounding hairs. Now, if you understand what a hair whorl is, a whorl is right here in your crown usually. Sometimes they have them out here on the nape. And it's where the hair just grows in this circular pattern. It kind of whirls around, right? That's why they call it that. So, if they're leaving the follicle at an angle different from the surrounding hairs, that is how you're going to get that whirl pattern. It's swirling around the head, around that area of the head, I should say. So your answer should be C for number 15. That is correct. Number 16. Each of the following is one of the main types of body hair except you've got terminal hair, lanugal hair, vellus hair, and anagen hair. Okay, anagen hair is the only one that is part of the stages. It's not a type of hair, it's a type of hair stage. Terminal hair, lanugo hair, vellus hair, those are all type of hair that you're going to find on your body. I believe terminal is like body, armpit hair, that kind of thing. Vellus hair, lanugo hair, those are all baby hairs. Like I think one's for a baby, I think is lanugo, and vellus hair is like hair that you find on your face and things like that. So the answer should be D for number 16. That is correct. Number 17, hair is approximately what percent protein? Well, if you know anything about hair, which is why you're in school, but hair is approximately 90% protein. Like it's basically made of protein. There's a few other items, but it's basically protein. So number 17 should be D, 90%. Number 18, the 3 different types of side bonds that link chains of amino acids together are, well, if you go back up to those bonds that make up the hair, we had, what do we have? We had carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and sulfur. So the only one that has all 3 of my 5 is A, oxygen, hydrogen, salt, and disulfide. Actually, I don't think that's right. Let me look. Okay, sorry. Let me back that up. They're talking about side bonds. They're not talking about the composites of the hair. So let me back that up and rephrase that. The different types of side bonds are going to be your hydrogen, your salt, and your disulfide. Those are the bonds that are broken when we're dealing with hair, whether we're coloring it, we're wetting it down, we're heating it up, we're perming it, whatever we're doing, those are your bonds, hydrogen, salt, and disulfide. So your answer 18 is D. The side bonds that link chains of amino acids together are hydrogen, salt, and disulfide. 19. What is the phase of the hair growth cycle in which the hair can shed? So you've got, just again, because I've done it, you've got anagen, catagen, and telogen. Nitrogen makes absolutely no sense. We can kick that out. Not an option. What is the phase of hair growth cycle in which the hair sheds? Well, that sheds at the end, and I know that they go ACT, anagen, catagen, telogen. So hair shedding happens at the end. So your answer is going to be C, telogen. Let me just verify. Yes. Telogen phase is when the hair is shed. Number 19. Number 20. In which phase of the hair growth cycle does the follicle canal shrink and detach from the dermal papilla? ACT. C, catagen, is when all of the hair starts to shrink and detach. Telogen is when it actually falls. So that is the route that we're going to go with. So we're going to go with catagen, and 20 is D, catagen. So you have your, they used to say growth fall replacement, but that's actually not true anymore. That's kind of dating myself. Anagen is your growth. Catagen is when it kind of shrinks and goes a little bit dormant, and then telogen is when it actually falls. So it's no longer growth, fall, and replacement. It's anagen, catagen, telogen. Telogen is when it actually detaches from the head. 21. Which of the following conclusions can a cosmetologist make if a client expresses concern about not being able to grow the hair beyond shoulder length? There we go with those long answers. You know how I love those. The anagen phase of the client's hair growth is shorter than the anagen phase in other people's hair grows, so the client's hair will not grow any longer. Anagen is when you grow. So the hair is going to grow. The catagen phase is when the client's hair growth occurs more quickly. Anagen, catagen, growth. Catagen is your dormant, so that should not be the answer. The client has a large amount of vellus hair than terminal hair, so the client shed most hair strands before. That has nothing to do with the hair on your head and whether it gets below the shoulder length. Or D, the client has primarily lanugo hair, which is shed more frequently than vellus hair or terminal hair. Again, that has nothing to do with it. So we're going to go with A or B. The anagen phase of the client's hair growth is shorter than the anagen phase in other people's hair growth, so the client, and I believe it's B, but let's look. 21, oh, sorry, A. So that is the answer. The anagen phase of the client's hair growth is shorter than the anagen phase of other people's hair growth, so the client's hair will not grow any longer. There could be other reasons why the hair grow any longer. Obviously, you can have breakage, or it can not be dormant as long and it actually falls out of the head, or things like that. So for this question, they're going with A. That is a reason why if your hair anagen phase is shorter, the hair's not going to grow as long. Like if I have somebody's hair anagen phase is super long, the hair's going to be super long. That makes sense, right? All right. 22. A long chain of amino acids linked by peptide bonds is called a blank chain. Well, none of these there are answers to those, but we're not going to go with those. I pretty much know the answer is going to be D, polypeptide. So when we link those chains together with those peptide bonds, that's where we're going to get our polypeptide, right? Poly is multiple, peptide is your bond. So we're going to get multiple peptides or polypeptide chains. So 22 is going to be D. Yes, D. 23. The measurement that describes the number of individual hair strands on 1 square inch of the scalp is usually the density. So that's how many hairs per square inch, right? So if I take 1 square inch and I draw it on top of somebody's scalp, right? 1 square inch, how many hairs fit in that little square is how dense the hair is, right? So it's either sparse or it's dense, and the more hair you have, the more dense it is. 24. The ability of the hair to absorb moisture. That's going to be porosity, right? Because if something's porous, that means it's going to absorb a lot of moisture. So 24 is A, porosity. 25. Which type of hair has the largest diameter and usually requires more processing? You've got terminal, coarse, medium, gray. Okay. Terminal hair is when it falls out of the head, so that can't be the answer. Medium, well, if I've got coarse and we're looking for the largest, medium can't be the answer either. D, gray hair. Doesn't sound right. Gray hair is not necessarily the largest diameter. There's all different types of gray hair. You can have fine gray hair, medium gray hair, coarse gray hair, so that can't be the answer. So the only answer that makes sense is the largest diameter is going to be your coarse hair. So number 25 is B, coarse hair. That was a pretty easy chapter to get through. Make sure you know your phases. Make sure you know about your peptide bonds and your polypeptide bonds. Make sure you know what the hair is comprised of, and those types of things, and you should be fine. Review the test, then you're ready. This is Real Talk with Miss Wendy, Chapter 7, Hair and Scalp Properties. I will see you soon for Chapter 8.